Well, I've been a big fan of Kerouac for many, many years, since late teens. And it's someone whose work stayed with me, who I still read. You know, I discovered back then, but throughout my adult life, pretty much, I've read several of his books multiple times, and he's always been a source of inspiration to me. And so that certainly attracted me to the project. And then when I saw it, I really thought it was important to introduce his work now in our current time to people who maybe haven't been exposed to him, or young people who haven't heard from him, and just see how the philosophies behind it and sentiments behind it and ideas behind the book and behind him as a human being and as a writer are still relevant and important. New York City, without a doubt. You know, I grew up about 20 minutes from here, but it was very different than Manhattan, right? It was, you know, just a more working class, very not a big city. But coming here as a teenager just felt like limitless possibilities, you know, which to me, I think is what Kerouac's road, you know, really symbolizes. You know, the possibility of expression as an individual, as experience and understanding yourself and understanding the world and being open to it. And the city kind of still represents that to me in a way. I've lived one other city really, besides where I grew up, and I left New York for a little while, but it was a beautiful small little beach place, but it never quite felt like home, you know. So there's something about that quality of New York's strange because you can be alone here, but to me it never feels lonely because you're always around humanity, and it's very accessible. It's also very confrontational because you're bumping up against people all the time, you know, on the subway and on the street and things like that. But I think there's something healthy about that. You know, some of it is what was listening to him, both watching interviews and listening to him read his own work. And I didn't want to imitate him, but there's something in the rhythm and the cadence to the way he reads it that I think I went for a little bit. Yeah, he was really the preparation, really hearing him. You know, I think, ironically, for being such a famous artist and so iconic, in many ways, I think he's very underrated as a writer. You know, he's kind of, huge as this cultural figure that represents the Beat generation, which gave birth to the hippies and the counterculture and this whole myth that surrounded him. But as a writer, I think sometimes his skill as a writer, I think, gets a little bit like second shift. Because he was, he's absolutely brilliant. I mean, there's passages in his books that are just lyrical and poetic and perceptive and have a very unique, specific flow. I mean, he really changed, ushered in a whole new style of literature and writing, how to approach writing in the English language, which was inspired by him watching bebop jazz musicians like Charlie Parker and seeing that they could take, a song into this totally uncharted territory in just this very free form of expression. It was like, can this be done with novel literature? My favorite of his books is Big Sur, and I think its depiction of addiction, is just really perceptive and honest and brutal. But there's a section in it where he was staying in this cabin in Big Sur, and he would go out at night to the shore where these big waves were crashing onto. It's a very rocky, rugged, dramatic place, Big Sur, and the shore there is very rocky, and there's cliffs and big stones, and the ocean is coming in and really slamming into the rocks and stuff, and he's just transcribing the sound, and it's like whoosh, kaploosh, shooshum, it's very beautiful. I don't want to misquote it and do it an injustice, but there's something, it goes on for a couple of pages, but he was magical as a writer, and I think that his artistry is something that I think should be treasured. Watch the movie, get inspired by the movie, get inspired by people's stories and them sharing their stories. Be curious about, your fellow human beings, and read some Kerouac.